Senior Center, and Age Alive, which is based at the College of Osteopathic Medicine. Hold on, let me just get rid of this if I can. No, I can't. Okay. So yeah, welcome everybody. I'm going to now hand over to Chris Ike, who is a member of the Scholars Program, and he will introduce our distinguished speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waller. I want everyone to join me in welcoming Dr. Mónica Ramírez-Montagut, who is the director of the MSU Broad Museum, for her talk tonight. Born in Mexico City, Dr. Ramírez-Montagut joined the MSU Broad team in 2020 after having served as director at the Newcomb Art Museum in Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. Throughout her extensive career, her approach to art is known for being both publicly engaged and socially conscious. Dr. Ramírez-Montagut received her Ph.D. in Theory and History of Architecture from the Universitat Politécnica de Catalunya in Barcelona, Spain. A trained architect, Dr. Rameriz-Montaugt co-curated the 2006 Zaha Hadid retrospective at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, and then made professional shifts to working with contemporary artists. In 2020, Dr. Rameriz-Montagut joined the Board of Trustees of the U.S. International Council for Museums, the Association of Art Museum Directors, and was one of the panelists of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs that selected artist Simone Leigh to represent the U.S. in the 2022 Venice Biennale. Welcome, Dr. Rameriz-Montagut.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Professor Waller, for inviting me in what is a very successful series. And so I hope I can contribute to the continued success of your Town and Gown program. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen now, and you'll see a PowerPoint that I prepared for you all. I think it's play from start. Okay. Hopefully you can see the whole screen. What I'm going to talk about today is an exhibition that is currently on view at the MSU Broad Art Museum. And as you know, I'm at the MSU Broad Art Museum since July last year, so about a year and 2 months into my tenure. And I wanted to make sure that one of the first things I did during my tenure early on was to show what a socially engaged art exhibition can be. What do we mean by social justice, or DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as an agenda for art exhibitions in museums? So I was keen on bringing a project that I developed in Louisiana in partnership with two formerly incarcerated women of Louisiana, Sirita Stipe and Delphinette Martin, and also in partnership with the curator at the Newcomb Art Museum, where I was formerly the director, Laura Plereau, and the deputy director, Miriam Taylor. So why an exhibition on mass incarceration, which is called Persister, and it's currently on view at the MSU Broad Art Museum. When I first arrived to New Orleans, I was asked to make sure the museum was relevant to our immediate communities. It's a similar mission that I now have the honor of trying to implement at the MSU Broad Art Museum. How can we make our museums really relevant to everyone in our immediate communities? So the first thing I did in Louisiana was ask, well, what are the most pressing critical issues? What are the obstacles that we have that are precluding us to move forward together as a community? And the answer was mass incarceration in the United States. The United States has the highest incarceration rates of any developed country in the whole world. We incarcerate more than our population, more population than all the NATO countries together. If we were to add, Italy, France, all of these countries together, we incarcerate more of that number in population. At any given moment, there's 2.2 million people incarcerated in the United States. This is unique to the United States. Mass incarceration is an issue particular to the United States. And Louisiana, when I was there, was known as a prison capital of the world. It incarcerates 1 in every 75 individuals. So when we did this exhibition, we realized that every time we had a group of about 10 folks and we were giving a tour, at least 1 or 2 were directly impacted. That is that they knew someone that was in the prison system at the time of their visit to the museum. And so this exhibition we brought at the MSU Broad, where do I move this here? So what we did with this exhibition on mass incarceration in the United States, and why the even though we originated it in Louisiana, it actually speaks to the story of the United States, because many of the women that are featured in this exhibition served their sentences in federal prisons, of which we have none in Louisiana, right? So the women would get sentenced and they would have to be sent to other states to serve their sentences. So what we did was to partner with our community. Consider our community our absolute equal partners of content and knowledge and expertise at the moment of developing these kind of exhibitions. And so we think this is a model. We learned a lot, and we're just sharing what we learned, hoping that not everybody has to start from scratch like we did at Newcomb. And it was at the Newcomb Art Museum at Tulane University where we initiated these. And then we followed it up with a lot of feedback from our communities. I'm gonna play a video for you. It's a short video, but it answers a question of what the directly impacted women. We partner with Sirita and Dolphinette, two formerly incarcerated women. And this video shows a little bit why they feel that partnering with an art museum to tell their stories is something that they felt it was important for them to do. Can you hear well? Can you hear well?
Monica, should there be voices at this point, or?
The music, can you hear?
Oh.
Is there music playing? Can you hear jazz music playing? You cannot hear anything.
It's garbled.
Oh, then this is not gonna work. Okay, so we're gonna skip the videos. Thank you for the feedback. I'm not really sure. Let me give it one quick try. No, you cannot hear sound. Okay, then we're gonna skip the video. The video talks, one of the colleagues, Sirita, is just saying how important it is for folks that they have lived their lives when incarceration in correctional facilities or inside jails and prisons. Folks tend to live invisible lives, and how important it is for the non-directly impacted people, the lay person, to understand what happens in those facilities. More so, not in detail, but more so the dehumanizing effect that occurs during the journey of people through their encounter with the justice system. The way that we organized the exhibition is we, the museum staff, interviewed 30 formerly incarcerated women, and we actually asked them what were their circumstances at the moment of their encounter with the prison system. We never asked them what they had done. We asked them, you know, what are the social, economic situation, family conditions that you have at the moment. We wanted to know who these women were and what were the root causes for incarceration. From these interviews, we got a lot of personal experience that actually matched the individual narrative, matched perfectly the data that we were getting from reports from the Vera Institute for Justice, for example, the Sentencing Project. We were getting a lot of numbers and percentages, and our interviews perfectly match what we were seeing in numbers. So the exhibition, what it does is actually humanize, you know, these numbers for us by giving us individual stories of these women. So our research told us that 86% of the women in jail have experienced sexual violence, 77 have experienced partner violence, 60% have experienced child abuse, 60% are unemployed at the moment of their encounter with the justice system, and about 32% of them suffer serious mental illness. And by serious mental illness, we're talking about schizophrenia, paranoia, suicidal. You know, it's not depression. It's actually serious mental illness that, you know, could potentially better be served in other institutions rather than the prison system, right? And maybe some mental health institutions. These are some of the reasons why the women that now call themselves persisters, the exhibition is called Persister, as in someone that persists, but also paying homage to the fact that the women talk about each other, they call each other sister, And because they've gone through this journey together and they can identify a little bit of a family resemblance in this kind of journey. So Delphinette, who is one of the women that co-curated the exhibition with us, says, we want people to understand what brought us here. Every woman or girl that goes to prison has a trauma. We are human, we are survivors, and my crime is not who I am. So for a lot of the women in the exhibition, they do not want to be called ex-cons. They don't want to be called inmates. They don't want to be called prisoners. They want us to put people first. So we say, you know, either women that have been formerly incarcerated or formerly incarcerated women, but people first, because as we saw from the data, a lot of the reasons for the women to have their encounter with the prison system is basically trauma, or basically because the prison system is today catching a lot of individuals that would be better served by other institutions that have been in decline or that have been closing, right? It's not casual that we see an increase of 834% of women in the prison system in the last 40 years, as mental health clinic hospitals have been closing, as substance abuse clinics have been closing. You know, the jails seem to be capturing a lot of that that population. The women are also keen on not saying my crime is not who I am as a person. And I think we can all relate with the fact that we don't get to define ourselves in general to the public by the worst thing that we've ever done in our lives, right? We generally get a second chance, and it's what this population really doesn't get. Sarita, who is our other consultant, also said, it is important that we are focusing on women because the role of women is not just to take care of everyone else. If you fix a woman, women will fix the world. This exhibition is also keen on presenting the stories of the women, and and the women were keen on focusing on women, and not as women as mothers, and that they're valuable because they're someone's mother, or because they're someone's sister, or because they're someone's mother. We see that discourse all the time, you know, particularly in the political sphere, where like we need to take care of women because they're mothers or their sisters or their daughters. Women are keen on saying like we have our self-evident rights to be appreciated just because we're women and not in function of anyone else. So the exhibition focuses on the women. This is a quote by Rontherin Ratliff. He was the first artist that we approached to see if he would create an artwork in honor of the story of one of the Pearl sisters, right? So as I mentioned, the museum staff interviewed 30 formerly incarcerated women, and then we asked 30 prominent artists in New Orleans to actually deploy all their artistic skills for which we had approached them, and suspend their own narratives and discourse as artists, and shift all their skills towards telling the story of one of these women in our own communities. Rontherim was the first one to agree, and Rontherim is directly impacted in the sense that during his childhood, his father was always in and out of these facilities. And so he wanted to be sure to address the conversation, destigmatize this conversation, given that it's like a big population that's being directly impacted, and be able to give back and have a candid conversation about what this implies. So for Rontherim, he said, there are many parallels between chess and life, and this is his piece. And I think if I'm sharing a screen, I'm actually blocking the piece for you guys, but this is a piece which is a chess game piece. It's a queen. It's a black piece of a chess game. And Rontherim says, there are many parallels between chess and life. They're polar battles of race and class, policing strategies, and in this case, queen sacrifice. At 19, Bobby Jean Johnson was coerced to confess and yet maintained her innocence. And after 41 years, she was exonerated and is now free. So just to share a little bit of like the point of view of the artist, which was to create these just remarkable metaphors for what they saw was the journey of several of these women. So about the show, like I said, the show presents the stories of 30 formerly incarcerated women. We were also keen on commissioning visual artists, but also performing artists. This exhibition originated in New Orleans, which is an important center of music and performing arts. And so several of the artists actually were commissioned as music pieces. And there's an important jazz concert created by Victor Atkins from the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra that will very graciously be performed by the jazz faculty of MSU in their opening series as jazz faculty concerts in February next year. So we will be able to see one of these compositions play live from by a very talented group of faculty. So Persister brings to light the myriad of issues facing our community, resilience and perseverance, and informally educates our visitors on mass incarceration. And so the objective is to actually map out the system of mass incarceration and see where we have points of crisis, and just let the audience, the visitors, just decide on their own, what do they think are the points where they can personally intervene. Why this exhibition? Because Louisiana is a prison capital of the world. Why women? Why did we focus on women? Because the incarceration of women has grown 834% over the last 40 years. Women have certainly not changed 834% in the last 40 years. There's been a change in the system that has particularly impacted women, and particularly women of color. So the exhibition looks at that and unpacks some of those changes in laws, changes in sentencing, changes in criminalizing activities that were previously not criminalized, and just shares that with the audience. And so the exhibition, like we said, what is going on? And it speaks here a little bit like the numbers that I was giving you before. This is what's going on. 82% of the women in the prison system are not there for violent offenses. But even if they're there for violent offenses, we need to keep in mind that a violent offense can be done to property, right? Can be done to a facade of a building, to a car. Not necessarily is violence against another human. 21% of the women are there because they didn't pay for their traffic fines, which in Louisiana can get you in prison because they missed their probation and parole meetings, because they are public order offenses, they get too loud in the public sphere. 32% of them are for property offenses. That means shoplifting. Dolita, Dolphinette, one of our consultants, was 10 years in the federal, in prison, not in federal, because she was caught shoplifting 3 times, right? And there's this law where if you have 3 mistakes, you don't get pardoned and you get incremented sentencing. 29% of the women in the prison system are there for drug offenses, and 18% of them are there for violent offenses, many of whom are there for retaliation against their abusers in a domestic violence kind of crisis. This is a profile. This is what we wanted to know. It is important to say that not one single one of the women in our exhibition don't acknowledge that they ended up in the prison system for a reason, except about 5 of them that were wrongfully accused and they were innocent. All the other ones, acknowledge that they had to pay their due to society, and they did. What the exhibition also lets us know is that even once you pay your due to society by having served your sentence, you are now trapped in this system of formerly incarcerated individuals that need to go to court to get their civil rights back. Folks are not allowed to vote. They lose their federal, help for housing and for food stamps, et cetera, et cetera. So what the data also shows us is the vast majority of women come out of the prison system in a worse circumstance that they went into. So what this exhibition does is questions a little bit this idea that the prison system is rehabilitating. And in that sense, we at the museum, when we took this over, we were keenly aware that none of us in the museum staff had direct knowledge of the prison system and the criminal justice system. So that's when we decided to hire folks that can tell us directly from their experience what was happening in the prison system. And as I said, we 150 individuals, we went and we asked for advice, and we had about 25 different nonprofits help us with the content of this exhibition, which was reflected in the knowledge and wisdom and course correcting from 150 individuals that range from students. Architecture students actually designed the exhibition for us, to the psychology professors, to the law professors, to the historians on slavery, et cetera, et cetera. to find a focus when you're dealing with communities, you can either do kind of like a survey, like map out a system, or you can also go in depth. In this case, the concepts of the exhibition that I will see, there were 4 concepts. What we asked Sarita and Delphinette was, what are the 4 things that people need to know before they leave the exhibition? Let's just focus on 4 important subject matters. And those 4 subject matters were identified by the women themselves. And they helped us find the folks. It was not the museum staff saying, well, I think you should, this is what you need to focus on. It was a complete kind of letting go of the authority of the museum staff and conveying that authority to our colleagues across the table and letting them have the authority to make those calls and those decisions. And then creating accountability. We treated Sarita and Delphinette like a staff member of the museum, and we run absolutely every single decision by them until they said, you know what, until the time for laying out the exhibition came, and they said, you're museum professionals, this is your expertise now, and now you surprise us, and we don't want to see the show until we walk through the museum doors on the opening day. It was really beautiful to see that wow factor of folks walking in not knowing what to expect, and then finding visually striking artworks representing their life's journeys. So the 4 themes, one was root causes of mass incarceration, and these are quotes again directly from our persisters. For a long time, women did not think that they had the right to own their bodies. And now women are fighting back from domestic violence or sexual assault or whatever it may be. And women are being criminalized because of that. I went to clemency hearings last week, and 10 of 11 women were domestic abuse survivors, and all 10 of them were serving life sentences for standing up to their abusers. This is what the incarcerated women see the system they see the system operating at that level. The image that we have on the right is actually a series of black and white photos. We took a photo of every single one of the persisters, and we selected 2 minutes of each one of them, of their interviews. So the other thing that we did in the exhibition that is important when we're talking about social justice and engaged scholarship at MSU in particular is that, these primary sources, these lived experience are really the backbone of your exhibition, and you need to make them available. So together with these photographs that we see here, we could also put at MSU, you can also go and listen directly to 2 minutes from each of the women. So we can hear directly from them different points of access. So we are providing different points of access. You can hear from the women directly, which is a little bit of an emotional labor, I have to admit. You can also hear about them through the voice of the artists. You could hear about their journey through a historical timeline that we have on the floor of the museum. And you can also comment back on some kiosks that we elicit responses from our audiences. But I think providing different points of access directly from the women, the artists, the history, context, maps telling us where incarceration facilities are, is important to these social justice exhibitions where maybe not everyone wants to hear directly from the voice of the women, because it is an intense hearing session, but we can certainly provide different points of access so that everybody feels comfortable accessing the same content in the way that they feel comfortable. So the infographics that I presented to you before are also on the museum walls. You can navigate the whole exhibition and leave knowing about these 4 main themes through the infographics exclusively only, for example. So just sharing with you some methods of what we did that we feel make this exhibition accessible for a diverse and varied audience. The second thing that we explored was that 80% of the women in the prison system are mothers. What does that mean? That means that we have a cycle of a high level of the children of these women going into the prison system, into the youth correctional facilities. And therefore, we need to pay attention to the fact that these mothers are mothering long distance, sometimes from facilities that are in different states. And the experience of not only mothering from long distance, but on occasion giving birth in the prison system. And so this is a testimony from Tremika, one of our persisters, and the image that you see above her quote is the image of the artwork in the museum. I was induced early. I had a baby 6 weeks early to not have her be born in the federal prison. I had a 3-year-old who had never left my side, and I remember her asking me, "Are you coming back?" And I always wanted to be there for my children, like nobody had been there for me. And I didn't see them for 10 months. I think some of the hardest narratives for the women to tell and for us to listen is, this the situation of mothers missing their children and not being able to see them grow and be there for them when they need them. And I think a lot of us can relate to that situation if you have children. The third subject matter that we explore in the exhibition is a physical and behavioral health toll on women. How, some of the facilities, the prison facilities were designed after the military complex, and they were designed predominantly for men. So in origin, none of these, the physical facilities or even the disciplinary systems of which the women are organized within are serving women well. And some of the disciplinary strategies really re-traumatize a lot of the women that have suffered domestic abuse. So a lot of the women in the prison system suffer of a mental and physical toll, and physical also because there's particularly needs of the female body that are not being particularly served in the prison system. So this is a testimony from Tanja. She says, "I feel like they don't give us adequate attention towards people's health. A lot of people have died because of a lack of giving them attention and what they need dealing with their health. Like my lady Bunky, she died and she was supposed to be coming home in a few days, but she died." It's important to say that we met Tanja when she had just left the prison system and she had been diagnosed with a type 4 breast cancer. She recovered, she's fine. But, we see that sometimes when women are offered clemency, it's because their health is suffering and that sometimes they need to get the health support that they need outside of the prison system. And then the fourth subject matter that we interviewed women and that the exhibition addresses is what comes next, challenges and opportunities of reentry. And this is a testimonial by one of our persisters whose life journey has been represented in this very New Orleanians Mardi Gras Indian suit. It's a tradition of Black folks in New Orleans, in those communities, and they are paying homage to the Native American communities that helped them escape slavery. And there's the Black communities come together in different tribes and they perform certain rituals and in dates that are important for them. They build community that way. And one of the Mardi Gras Indian queens approached us and said that she wanted to contribute to this project by doing a Mardi Gras Indian queen for one of the persisters. And that persister is Zina. And Zina said, "Each time I went to prison, it didn't better or help me. It just showed me a different way to hustle. And I didn't know about no reentry. They gave me 4 flat years, let me do them 4 years, and then put me out. And then they left me with the words, 'Oh, you will be back.'" A lot of the women, and I think for a lot of the folks that are not really familiar with the incarceration system in the United States, the big surprise is really the challenges of reentry. And those challenges, as told, you will see in the exhibition, some of the women coming out of the prison system receive a check for $20 when they leave the facility, and they are wearing the clothes that they're wearing. And then they put them on a bus, maybe at midnight, whenever their paperwork came through. They come to New Orleans Center, if that's New Orleans. They arrive at 2 or 3 in the morning where they've been distancing from their families. They have no one to receive them other than folks sometimes that are there to be predatory. In any case, for example, when they get a $20 check, a lot of the women don't even have birth certificates or an identification that they could go to a bank to cash those $20. So even the money that the prison system gives them as they are released, they really don't have the opportunity to cash into that opportunity. So things like that, details like that are described in the exhibition. So the museum reached out to, so those are the 4 things that we're looking into the exhibition. The museum reached out to prominent artists and musicians in New Orleans and asked them to deploy their artistic skills towards telling the story of the women. What we have here is the image of Zina wearing her Mardi Gras Indian costume, and Cherise Nelson Harris, the lady in the middle, she is a Mardi Gras Indian queen, and Cherise's mother, who is also a Mardi Gras Indian queen, kind of offering this artistic interpretation of Zina's life, and Zina receiving this dress and wearing it for them. The other thing that we did was actually, it was not the museum staff, and it currently is not the museum staff, the ones that are giving the tours of the exhibition. It is It is basically the community, those 120 individuals. And in the case of our show here at MSU, we partner with 88 individuals locally to help us see through these mass incarceration exhibitions, of which we did several projects specific to Michigan, as to be in dialogue with Persister. It is our community colleagues. They are the ones that are giving the tours of the exhibitions. And here, for example, we have one of our Persisters. She was receiving an award for the work that she did, and there was going to be a TV feature on her. She requested that, you know, her award ceremony be filmed in the gallery space of the Persister show. And so we hope that once we do these kind of exhibitions, that the exhibition functions as a platform for civic dialogue, that our communities feel comfortable enough coming to the museum, hosting their own communities, hosting their own board meetings, award ceremonies, lunches, debriefing in that gallery space, because it's telling their stories and it's giving context to a lot of the work that they do in their organizations. So at the Broad Museum, if you go into our education wing right now, next to the cafeteria, you will actually see the photos of the 88 individuals that helped us develop the exhibitions that are particular to Michigan. And not only to pay homage to wisdom and the experience and expertise they brought to the project, but also for folks to identify them in the community and be able to get further engaged, right? A lot of folks would want to know, well, what can I do to change this? Well, go to our education wing, you will be able to see, you know, 88 of our folks that are dealing with these issues, and we can always, you know, give them a helping hand. A couple of things with these kind of socially engaged exhibitions. We are talking about our content matter is that our human beings, right? It's not just the art on the walls. That actually comes second to the content of the exhibition. And in a lot of these exhibitions, the work behind the scenes, building trust with the directly impacted community, building trust between that community and our campus experts, building all that trust with the museum, figuring out how we're going to work together is actually the most important part of these exhibitions. Once we get something on the wall, then the success is already there, right? The buy-in has already taken place. Because the subject matter is so essential, it's like the human condition, we know that there are going to be emotional responses to the exhibition, diverse and varied responses. So we have to be able to channel those responses either into here 88 folks that you can go to and volunteer with, if that's the way that you would like to channel your response, or like this image of the tree, which is just really an interactive kind of tool that we have on the exhibition wall, acknowledging that the timeline, the historical timeline of the history of incarceration in the United States is very official and institutional and never really reflects the dates, how it impacts people in the prison system, or people that because of that change in sentencing, suddenly they find themselves in the prison system where if they were living in a different state, they would not be in the prison system, or if they were in another state, their sentence wouldn't be as harsh, right? So anyway, acknowledging that individual timeline, what we did was to actually really literally branch out a historical timeline to let directly impacted individuals insert via adding a leaf to the tree of the dates that are important to them, and acknowledging that, you know, this has an impact on you and we want to acknowledge. So you will see that our MSU tree, actually, it's interesting, has dates from folks that after seeing the exhibition, they feel comfortable enough and vulnerable enough to contribute with important dates of when their loved ones either went into the prison system or when they came out. But it's also turned into a little bit of a COVID memorial, I have to say, which is really good because these are actually healing tools. Like, we know we're doing a good job when folks actually feel encouraged to participate with this kind of very emotional kind of information to share publicly. We also, as you walk into the MSU Broad Art Museum, the second floor, you will see that there's like a cloud with like a cloud of like white envelopes hanging where you can actually write a message, put it into one of those white envelopes, and we will make sure that people in the prison system receive those messages. And that we have, you know, not our activity cards, but that we have in our education wing information of folks that can give you more information. And so, you know, what's the response of these exhibitions? You know, what's the impact? We have been receiving a lot of messages from students letting us know that this has been just really a very important transformational kind of exhibition that they actually did not know. They did not know, right? And that they were highly educated and that they didn't know how much they needed this kind of exhibition. So, well, yes, it's a little bit of an emotional exhibition because we're talking about the human condition of our fellow community members. Our community is transformational, educational, and what we've heard is that it's necessary. At an institutional level, we've seen diversity increase. We've seen a lot of engagement. At MSU, we have already about 45 faculty members requesting special tours with their students. And we've had, for example, the opening reception at the museum doubled already our normal attendance numbers for exhibitions. I was gonna play another video for you guys, but since it's not working, just let you know that this is a video about one of our persisters that as we interviewed her a month after she came outside of the prison system, she actually died of health issues during the run of the exhibition. And these health issues were hepatitis C, and kidney problems, you know. And she was a persister called Bobby Jean Johnson. This is a video that pays homage to her life, because had we not done this work with her, had we not interviewed her, and the artist Rontherim, and her piece is the Black Queen piece of a chess game, there would be very little documentation of Bobby Jean Johnson's passing in this earth. You know, she went to prison at the age of 19. She was actually given clemency at 60, and then she died a year after she left the prison system. So what we have is basically the in-depth documentation of one of these lives that would otherwise be somewhat invisible to us. And it's just the video does show Bobby Jean responding to her sculpture, thanking the artist, thanking the sculpture, and thanking the museum for doing this job, telling her story. But she's also, at the end of the video, she just says, you know, I just forgive everyone. You know, she was tortured to confess to the crime. She always claimed that she was innocent. They were able to demonstrate that she was innocent. So she went 40 years in prison while being innocent. And she just forgave at the end of the video. She's like, I love my life. I could have been better, but I just forgive everyone. And I just think people need to move forward with love. And that's how that video finishes. So I like finishing my talk with those words from Bobby Jean, because I think they're very, very powerful. And so this is just, a little mosaic of like formerly incarcerated. Down here, we have formerly incarcerated women performing their own stories. We have the lawyers that defended some of the women. We have the women and their artists. We have some of the performers that we have, families of incarcerated members sending messages to their loved ones. And it just shows kind of like a wide range of impact that these kind of exhibitions have, from the production side of things to all the way to the visitors that come to the exhibition. And so I wanted to, it's kind of like a behind the scenes journey of what it takes to do one of these exhibitions, what the objectives can be, and how the impacts of these exhibitions can have on the visitor, with the idea that, to encourage you all to actually see the exhibition and give us feedback. What we did with Persister is that it actually encouraged the other 5 exhibitions that we have in the museum. We said, well, we cannot bring just the Persister exhibition to Michigan without addressing Michigan-specific issues. So the other exhibitions in dialogue with Persister are Free Your Mind, Free and Art and Incarceration in Michigan, curated by Janie Paul and Stephen Bridges, and showing a lot of work made by incarcerated individuals on view at the museum. That was one of the feedbacks we received from Persister, was like, well, there have to be artists producing in the prison system. Where is their art? We heard that feedback. We did a whole exhibition dedicated on that. We heard from the perspective of mothers, incarcerated mothers trying to mother long distance, and how this continues like a cycle of recidivism. And so we have an exhibition of currently youth living in correctional facilities in Michigan, that were given pinhole cameras, low-tech cameras to take black and white photos in partnership with the Youth Arts Alliance. And that exhibition is on view of youth actually documenting their own lives in these, how they live in these facilities, which is interesting because being teenagers, you know, their colleagues outside of the correctional facilities are over documenting their lives on Instagram, right? And here we have these youth living in correctional facilities that with these analog techniques are being able to somewhat document their lives. We have an exhibition at the Art Lab across the street on a group of artists that have left the prison system, but they continue to do art. And that's, we gave them the space at the Art Lab. They have their art there. It's called Returning Citizens. We also have a small exhibition called Silence, and it's basically letters and artworks done by Michiganders living in isolation and confinements in cells where they live on their own for long periods of time. And the last one is a very sweet show that it's in the lower level of the museum. I hope you can see it. It's about youth aging out of the foster care system. And again, with the Youth Arts Alliance, they're giving kind of like scale model space, like almost like shoeboxes spaces to create an environment that they can see themselves inhabiting in the future. This is an exercise to help the youth already envision a positive identity and start seeing some pathways of where they can start going by making the right decisions. And those scale models are just adorable. They're just like a Nike store or like a movie theater, a farm, a landscape company. I mean, youth, when you ask them, it is absolutely very clear where they want to go, given the opportunity. And so all of those exhibitions actually were envisioned as a response to the feedback we received from her sister. So I would like to encourage you all to visit the museum, give us feedback, and you know, all sorts of feedback. We've also learned a lot from shortcomings, and just find ways where we can leverage the expertise of our on-campus community, right? We have incredibly talented faculty and students really generously offering, you know, their expertise towards moving these projects forward. And I think that those are just great projects where we can all kind of like learn from each other and become a learning community and just help us move forward together as a community, maximizing our campus resources. So that was my presentation. Thank you for your patience. I know I speak very fast, so thank you everyone for listening, and I'm like very open to questions and answers or comments or observations.
Thank you, Dr. Rameriz-Montagut. So now we're going to move into our question and answer phase of the night. If you have a question that you want to put in the chat, I can read it aloud for you, or if you want to ask Dr. Rameriz-Montagut in person, you can raise your hand and I will call on you. That being said, who has a question? Judith. Oh, you're muted, Judith.
You're muted.
Yeah, here we are.
Yes.
I have been in my life very fortunate to spend time in many museums across the world. I have never in my life seen a museum hold an exhibition that functions within the broader society. Instead of going in and looking at Degas and, you know, everybody else, and I love that, but this is functional. And it's amazing. I'm an anthropologist, so I have that vision of that kind of extension. And I think I can appreciate the value of this. I had no idea. And I want to thank you and your staff and everything else. And I will be there to see that and everything you put on from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judith. Yes, thank you. Yes, usually museums, I think we look very much at the past, or art museums, we look very much at like the creative genius of this isolated artist, right? But I think we live in times where like, what if we all come together with our skill sets? We acknowledge diversity and inclusion and equity. And what if we put that into action to the betterment of our problems of the 21st century? I do think that goes very much in line with the new strategic plan of the university, right? Where we are creating, we hope at MSU, we are creating future leaders of the global world that will be impacting Michigan, right? How do we do that? I do think that this is one model to do that. And it's anchored in the past. Of course, we have a historic timeline, but it's really deploying all our expertise and whatever skills we may have towards bettering the future, right? So it has to be, this is a kind of like a forward-looking kind of exhibition aimed at.
I was particularly pleased that you brought the women actually going through this into the system, and they created what they needed. In anthropology, we call that participant observation. And I've never seen it executed like this before. So thank you again. It's amazing.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat from Joel and Kathy Hoffman, and they are wondering, what are the days and hours you can get a tour at the museum?
Right. You can always ask. We're asking folks to request a tour online. So you can either send a request for a tour to the General Museum email address. You can send an email to me, and let me put my email here. And then you can also request for a tour from our education director. But let me tell you something. There's my email. Yes, we have a really robust roster of, I believe it's 48 public programs in partnership with these 20 units on and off campus. Every Saturday, I believe at 2 p.m., there is a tour by one of the artists showing in the museum. And it's most likely a formerly incarcerated individual that has art being shown in the museum. So that's an ongoing thing that we have right now in the museum. And we have really at least 1 or 2 public programs. Some of them are still on Zoom, some of them are in person, precisely because we're leveraging the expertise of our partners. And so if you want to sign up to our newsletter on our website, we are sending an email every 2 weeks, letting you know what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. And you get a lot of information there, including those tours on Saturdays at 2. I'm going to be giving a couple of tours also coming up. And then you can also sign up for a free membership. And you can, and by doing that, you just give us your address and we send you a calendar, a printout calendar every season, one for the fall and one for the spring, of all the programs that we have for the whole semester, so that we make sure you don't miss out on anything. So several opportunities. You can always email me, email the museum director. Her address is on the website. I don't know it by heart. And or just come on a Saturday and get a tour directly from one of the artists. So several opportunities. Did that answer your question, Joel and Kathy? Is that enough information? Do you want me to be more precise? Anyway, you can always email me and I'll give you as much information as you need.
Other questions? This is from Marianne, and she said that she just wondered if the documentary filmmaker Rudy Valdez of Lansing, Michigan was known to you. His film, The Sentence, won the People's Choice Award at the Sundance Festival a couple of years ago. HBO now owns it. It was the story of his sister's incarceration in a federal prison and how it affected her extended family. She was pardoned by President Obama.
You know, thank you, Marianne. I was not familiar with that, but one of our community colleagues, one of our partners is Professor Francisco Villarruel from the Julian Zamora Research Institute. He was also appointed by Obama, President Obama, to be part of the Youth Alliance for Juvenile Justice, I believe. It's not the actual name. And he brought this to my attention, and he has been instrumental in getting us letters that are on view at the museum from youth and juveniles sentenced to life sentences when they were teenagers, and telling they are not in this circumstance now, but telling us a story of when they were teenagers and they encountered suddenly a life sentence, what that experience was like. And we have those letters on view, and those were facilitated to us by Francisco Villarruel, and he is the one that brought to my attention this movie by Rudy Valdez. And needless to say, I hope that this is I'm not sharing a screen, but I hope that this is the first of many programs that we do and many exhibitions. I do think we need to revisit this subject matter at least once every 4 years until it is not an issue, and that we will be able to build our awareness, build our education, and be able to incorporate all of these knowledge and information like Marianne just brought to my attention, so that we can continue building our content and our knowledge base. Because one exhibition, one-off, is just not enough, right? For these subject matters that we really need to see deep awareness. And that as you do the exhibitions, more artists and more content keep showing up, which is how we did 5 more exhibitions besides Persister. So we're taking note of everything that's being told to us, and we will certainly use that for follow-up programs, or maybe even perhaps follow-up exhibitions in years to come.
Thank you. This question is from Jennifer Banks and from someone else. When will your exhibition go after it closes, and when will it close?
Yes, it closes. All of them close on December 12th. And actually, I would like to encourage you, if you have not, if you by December 12th, you've not been able to go to the museum, to visit on December 12th, because I've asked all these 88 individuals that helped us create these exhibitions to actually join us on December 12th and kind of like be there available for people that want to meet them. So we will have kind of like a closing celebration on that day. It closes December 12th, and the Persister exhibition will then go to Syracuse University. I believe after Syracuse University, it will go to New Hampshire, and after there, it will go to North Carolina, to Myrtle Beach Museum. I don't think it's North Carolina. It's in one of the Carolinas. And it will continue to travel as it's requested by other university museums. The Persister exhibition, the artists donated all the art to the Newcomb Art Museum of Tulane. So the whole exhibition is owned by Tulane, and they can actually travel it as much as it needs, because it's all together, it's already in a packet. One thing I have to say towards social justice is that all the women were paid for their interviews and all the emotional labor that they went through. Many of them were asked for the first time ever in their lives, what was their situation? Like, nobody had really asked with care, what was going on, and without judgment. And so that implied a lot of emotional labor for many of them. It was the first time they had told their own stories to anyone that was very willing to listen. And we also paid the artists when we commissioned them, and we wrote special contracts with the artists that if they ever sold their art, 20% of those proceeds needed to go back to the Persister that had inspired that artwork. Most of the artists donated the art to the museum collection, and a handful of them actually sold the art back to us, the museum that had commissioned them, because precisely they wanted to make sure that some of that 20% fee went back to their Persisters. And the other thing is that every time this exhibition travels, part of the rental fee, I would say about 66% of the rental fee goes back to the women. So every time their stories are told, and of course, these are monies that are more symbolic than really transformative. But in any case, there's a new way of working with artists and how to understand the content of what we're developing with more social responsibility that needs to be factored in when we do these kind of projects. I know nobody asked that, but I just wanted to let you all know, because it's been something that people have asked us.
Have you had any tours of prison guards or prison wardens or judges?
Yes, there is a panel, and I should have brought my calendar with me. There is a panel, and I hope it hasn't yet passed, organized by Professor Emily Smith, where she's actually bringing a public defender, a district attorney, a sheriff, and a directly impacted individual on a panel. And I don't have the information, but who's asking? Because I can send it to you like later today. I'll send it to John and John. That's Joel and Kathy. Joel and Kathy, I'll try to get your information. We did this exhibition, all of it is Heidi Washington, who is an MSU alumni. I believe she's the director of all the correctional facilities in Michigan. She's the person that allows for the art program to take place inside the mission and inside the correctional facilities, that allows for us to be able to show the art that we're showing. It's through a project called Prison Arts Creative Program, organized by University of Michigan. And so Heidi, for example, she's very aware that this is happening, and she gave us permission to actually, use some of the art produced in the facilities she oversees. So in terms of wardens, we don't have a tour with wardens, but we do a couple of, at least one security guard working in the museum right now was a security warden at a correctional facility. And while I haven't elicited feedback yet, I should. I do have to tell you that at Tulane, for example, the policeman, one of the police women that was the weekend police assigned to the museum, had been a correctional facilities warden, a prison warden, and she actually knew the women on view, and she was just really surprised to see women that she knew being highlighted in the art museum, and she was delighted. I mean, there's these are worlds that are become familiar. These are communities that have to learn how to live with each other, and having a terrific warden is life-changing for many of the women. In Louisiana in particular, there are 12 women. When Katrina happened, the women's facility in Louisiana flooded up to the neck. And it was a warden that before going home and evacuating her own family, she made sure she went and she evacuated at least 12 women, several of them in our exhibition, and got them to a temporary facility, a male facility, temporary. She saw them to safety, and then she went and evacuated with her family. So there is a very close link between wardens and incarcerated individuals. And they're, and they call, I know that the women call them super sisters, but they speak very highly of their wardens when it merits. I know it didn't answer your question, but there is that link between museum security officers that have also served in security situations in facilities, prison facilities.
Thank you. I believe Dr. Waller has a question.
Monica, thank you. That was a really wonderful presentation. I saw the exhibition about a month ago and reflected on it many times since. I've been to a large number of exhibits at the Broad, but to me, it's by far and away the finest and most significant. So thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first is you quoted the figure about the number of women incarcerated having increased by well over 800% in 4 decades. Would you mind saying a little bit about why that trend has occurred, particularly given that the vast majority of the offences are non-violent? And just if I can squeeze in another question, the one exhibit that really I found haunting was the wedding dress. Would you mind just saying a few things about that?
Right. Thank you, John. And I need to thank you in return, because Professor Wallen was one of those faculty members that I had met, I think, once or twice. And I was like, by the way, John, you know, a good student. And then John actually suggested a terrific student, Jasmine Jordan, to do some research for us, particularly within the Michigan state system. And Jasmine was instrumental getting us information and snapshots on Michigan. And she was interviewed for our free brochures. Also, we have free brochures that accompany these exhibitions that give you a lot of content of what is on view, but also other things that are probably not on view. And so it's thanks to very enthusiastic and engaging professors like Professor Waller that we get to have access to really talented students that help us move everything forward. So thank you, John. To answer your question, the increase in the last 40 years of incarceration of women is several changes in sentencing and in law, many of them directed at the war on drugs. So once we decided that we were going to have a law against drugs, and we said, you know, crack cocaine is just the absolute worst, and we double, triple the sentencing for folks consuming or, you know, with drug addictions or drug trafficking of that. While we did not for cocaine, it kind of like separated two communities, and it was basically the war on drugs that hyper-criminalized small amounts of drugs in predominantly communities of color. In the case of women, also, I mean, several of the women that we interviewed buy and sell small amounts of cannabis in their neighborhoods. They need to walk into informal economies in order to support, you know, their 4 or 5 young kids that they have at home. Several of the women also that we interviewed are sex workers. And again, these are unemployed women, single moms, head of households, where they are not able to get, formal economy jobs. Some of them, do the small trafficking of cannabis or also engage in sex work. A couple of the women are also of transsexual, 3 women are of transsexual experience. And for example, the sentencing for sex work for folks of transgender experience is much harsher legal. I mean, there's like specific laws targeting homosexual and transgender sex work at a higher sentencing rates than the heterosexual sex work. Laws in domestic abuse, for example, several of the women we interviewed, there's domestic abuse laws, for example, in Louisiana. If there's a domestic dispute, someone calls the police, the couple that's disputing needs to solve their issue right then and there, or the police actually book them both. They take them to a station and they book them both. So a lot of the women just say, no, yes, we agree, we're fine, nothing here to see, because they don't want to be booked because they risk losing their children. There is a law that was under the Clinton administration that any child that's been more than 12 months in the foster care system can be adopted away from their parents. And so a lot of women know that if they get booked and if they're in the system, they may lose their children. So they decide not to. And then that escalates a domestic situation. So for example, in a physical fight, if a man were to hit a woman, that's a misdemeanor, but it's a misdemeanor. What's the other one? That's it. And then, but if a woman were to grab an object and fight back, that's a higher offense. I can't remember. Misdemeanor. What's the other one? I'm blanking on the
felony.
Right. So in the same domestic dispute, we see that women will have a harsher sentence than a man. There's a lot of little things like that in the system, but it's basically a lot of fear of women losing their children that sometimes, and there's this system with district attorneys where several of the women in the exhibition were encouraged to plead guilty and just leave that day, just like plead guilty, you'll get probation, you do your probation, but you get to go back home today, as opposed to waiting here for a trial and to be defended. So it operates that way. Like these guilty pleas are normal in the American US justice system. And a lot of folks plead guilty, not realizing that if you plead guilty, now you're in the system, and anything that happens after there puts you in a more critical situation where you can be incarcerated up to 10 years for shoplifting 3 times, right? Because you plead guilty. So it's a lot of details, but certainly such a myriad of details that are actually not well known by the directly impacted folks at their moment with the justice system. The justice prevails these kind of mass incarceration. In Louisiana also, for example, if you don't pay your traffic fines, you can go to jail. So you can go through a red light, and if you haven't paid your parking fees, like the police can stop you there and book you and put you in jail. And once you're in the system, even if it's for traffic fines, you're in the system. That's your first mark, 2 more of those, and you go in for time. And so it's a really harsh sentencing system. There's also in the war against drugs, there was a lot of discretionary sentencing that was taken away from judges. And you hear that a lot in Louisiana, where maybe a judge understands the poverty and underserved communities and racial tensions in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And however, that type of crime, there was a law that was passed that forces a judge to sentence someone for life or to sentence someone for 5 years. In Louisiana in particular, until 2018, we had a lot of sentences that were not unanimous, which is interesting because in American popular imaginary, we've all seen those movies where the jury has to be unanimous to sentence someone for life. That did not happen in Louisiana. I believe it still doesn't happen in Oregon. There's a couple of states, there's a handful of states in the United States where unanimous juries still do not apply. And that is a kind of strategy still left over from the Jim Crow times. And we at Louisiana, during the run of this exhibition, or a little bit before, there was a really citizens campaign to make sure that these non-unanimous juries where people were sentenced to life were not acceptable anymore. And our current district attorney in New Orleans is actually making sure that some of those hopefully get revised, things like that. So anyway, it's a little bit of everything, I have to say. And as you start unpacking, you know, the myriad of things that are surprising that are happening in the United States today, it's a little bit overwhelming, hence the very emotional responses to these exhibitions. And rightly so, John, one of your responses to the wedding dress that we see in the exhibition Free Your Mind is from a current incarcerated artist who just knows that, you know, being sentenced for life, she may not be able to come out of the prison system and get married and have children like she always thought she was going to. But nonetheless, she has not given up on that dream. And in the prison system, she crocheted a whole bride's dress for her, and just materializing some of those ideas that that, you know, as humans, we just cannot never let go of hope and of dreaming. And you really, I do firmly believe that you never know with the current prison system. There was a woman in our exhibition, Persister, that was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for a small amount of cannabis. And her family requested President Obama for pardon. He declined, and the family requested a second time, and he agreed to that clemency. So suddenly a woman that had been sentenced for 2 consecutive lifetimes, already denied clemency by President Obama, suddenly one day she gets clemency and she gets pardoned, right? And so I think those are the kind of stories that allow for someone to still crochet, you know, create a wedding dress for herself, because I think you really never know, for one. And second, you have to have that you know, that hope to get you through your days and not take away your humanity. I think ultimately what folks in the prison system fight every day is to keep their humanity intact, which is every day a challenge.
Thank you. This is a question from Jacqueline Urban, and her question is, have you ever heard of Shaka Senghor? He's a formerly incarcerated male born and raised in Detroit and imprisoned in Michigan. He has a moving personal story to share. TED Talks features one of his presentations known as Why Your Worst Deeds Don't Define You.
I have heard of him. Several folks have brought him to our attention. We have not been able to work with him yet, but he's on the list of folks that we want to, and he was also on the list of folks that we wanted to bring and give a tour or give a talk. And a lot of our plans actually got a little bit scaled back because of COVID. I have to say we had big, bold plans for this round of exhibitions and bringing, you know, international thought leaders or local folks with a lot of community understanding here, particularly to the Michigan area. And we had to scale back, but we have, and he's on our list of folks to engage for the next round or to continue programs. And we're also thinking now to do some sort of follow-up in February when the jazz concert takes place, and see if we can take that opportunity in February that there will be a jazz concert telling the story of 2 of our persisters, to see if we can do a little bit more programs. And so I'm taking notes on all your names, and maybe I can follow up with a special program at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Kent Workman just wanted to comment that this was fantastic and that he is a part of an artist circle, or part of an artist circle, and we will be coming to see the exhibit. The group will. We've kind of talked about judges, legislators, and police, but Joel and Kathy Hoffman wondered if you've invited legislators, judges, police chiefs from.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'll find out that yes. And I actually, I am doing that through the Office of Governmental Affairs of MSU. I did get a letter from Elise Slotkin as soon as I arrived to MSU, a handwritten note, her thanking me for what we do for our community. So needless to say, I'm reaching out through MSU's governmental affairs, and we are reaching out to all our elected officials, senators, absolutely everyone that MSU, a lot of, you know, has engaged with, which is absolutely everyone. And we have a couple of dates in late October where we will be blocking 2 days for all the elected officials that want to come visit the exhibition to take tours with me. So we are, I'm not really sure who has replied yet, but we're actively sending them. And that is because you know, in New Orleans, we had the former mayor of New Orleans, the current mayor of New Orleans visit the exhibition, the president of the city council other members of the city council. The current district attorney visited the exhibition. The judges, very important, like the judges, 4 judges of the juvenile criminal court in New Orleans, suspended a full day of activities and sent all their staff to the museum to do an empathy and compassion training. And that one, we had parole and probation officers, as you know, getting to know the women that some of them whose children they are managing. And we actually invited, you know, former incarcerated mothers to talk to the parole and probation officers about their children and the challenges that their children were going through when their mothers were incarcerated. So that was a really important activity. So because of that kind of level of engagement from folks working inside the criminal justice system, we are keen on making sure we reach out to all those folks currently through the exhibition. So because we are able to go until December, we're doing those invitations now. But that's interesting because this exhibition, we were targeting, representing the lives of individuals that remain invisible to many of us, right? Like serving the underserved communities, telling their stories. That was our target, and to do well by them, right? Accurately, as I said, you know, they assume the responsibility to society. This is not glorifying anyone, but accurately representing their stories. And we saw that a lot of the folks that were coming to the exhibition were the judges that had defended them, that had no idea they were going through those challenges during re-entry. They had no idea they were going through some of the issues they were going inside the prison system. So we saw a lot of our visitors being judges as well. And in one occasion in New Orleans, because we were getting like everyone in the room, like we would do like these brunches with everyone in the room every 2 months. At some point, we had a woman, you know, one of our persisters and the judge that had sentenced her for 3 years in the same room, and that played out in front of us, where one of the women stood up and said, like, Judge Johnson, you know, I'm a woman that you sentenced for 3 years, and I have to thank you. It was not the best experience of my life, needless to say, but it didn't pull me out of a vicious cycle that I would have never been able to live had it not been for that. Like that was playing out behind the scenes for this exhibition. But there is an absolute interest of folks inside the criminal justice system that they know, I think, many of them understand the complexities of the system and perhaps the need for reform. And they are, they understand, you know, and they are keen on seeing and learning more of where what their role is in a system and how we, the layperson, are understanding the system from afar.
Jennifer Banks is wondering if you could talk about the age range of the participants in the exhibit.
That is a very good question. We had a wide range. We have a wide range. You know, some of our, I mean, right now we have from kids in foster care, and while it's not really fair to bulk in youth in foster care with incarcerated individuals, they're completely 2 different communities and different situations. What is true is that if a kid in the foster care does not find a family that can host him or her, that kid is actually hosted in youth correctional facilities. So, you know, they have the same kind of like environment growing up. So that's why we are also talking about youth in foster care. So we have that in the exhibition. We have teenagers in our exhibition, all the way to very senior artists. Because one of the issues that we're exploring in the Michigan exhibition is that Michigan is a top 5 state in incarcerating youth, children in these correctional facilities, but also giving really long sentences. So what is happening is that we have senior populations in the prisons where, you know, the younger residents of the facilities are actually taking care of the senior elderly incarcerated individuals. So we have an aging population, and they will have a lot of medical needs. And now that these courses they're getting these needs, you know, met, or is there a point where we should just, you know, let folks go home and allow for their families to take care of them? So we have an aging population in Michigan and also in Louisiana, but particularly in Michigan. So the range is wide and vast. In Persister, for example, we had some of our younger persisters where Shy Parker stopped also for some traffic fines, and the boy he was dating, you know, got in trouble as well, and she was there. So she got in trouble also just by being there, the conspiracy kind of sentencing, where if you're just there and you know about it, you get the same sentence as if you were the perpetrator. That's impacting a lot of women as well. And so Shy was 21 years old, and she already had, you know, a record that she's trying to get expunged, for example, at 21. So it went from 21 to senior women, you know, about in their late 60s. I do think, I'm speculating here, but I think the healthcare in the prison systems really does not allow for the lack of healthcare support does not allow for like incarcerated people to live, you know, up to 80, things like that. And I think what we see is a lot of folks just being 60 and 70 years old, and that's about it. And this is me speculating, but that's based on you know, some of the folks we've been interviewing.
Thank you.
Did I answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, welcome, Jennifer.
I just want to point out that Lead Michigan commented 2 names in the chat, Efron Paredes Jr. and Barbara Hernandez, as 2 potential voices for incarcerated individuals from Michigan.
Thank you. Let me write that down.
Are there any final questions for Dr. Rameriz-Montagut? All right, I think that is a good time to wrap up the evening. I want to thank Dr. Rameriz-Montagut for joining us, and everyone else for taking the time to join this.
Chris, can I just interrupt you?
Yes.
Harry, I think there was a question.
Yeah, I did have one. You probably didn't see my hand.
Oh, I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Hari Kern. Thank you so much, Monica, for your wonderful presentation. Every time I hear you talk, I learn more and more. It's just great. This exhibit is wonderful. One thing I would, I don't think I've heard about, maybe you mentioned it, but have you, what is some of the feedback you've had from women who have been incarcerated about this exhibit in Louisiana and then here in our exhibit here?
Thank you, Carrie. Harry, the women, I think it takes a while. Like the first impact, the first response to the women was, you know, why are you interested in me, right? Like after a life of neglect and being ignored, basically, you know, why suddenly, you know, someone like Tulane University or the MSU Broad Art Museum from Michigan is interested in my story, right? So that's the first initial response. I think that as they see their stories play out in these environments and people being genuinely curious and not judgmental, I think their own perception of their own life story changes. And what I have seen in the Persister women, like we first installed this exhibition almost 3 years ago, right? And the process started 4 years before. It took me 4 years to pull it off. So it's been like almost 7 years since I started, you know, talking to my colleague Siri Tendolfinet, where there was a high level of like suspicion, right? What has played out is that the women have realized, and I have seen them, you know, from the opening at Tulane and how they told their own stories to the opening we had at the Ford Foundation in New York. And the Ford Foundation actually presented the funds to bring as many persisters as possible. Not all of them were available, but I think we brought about 15 of them to the opening in New York City, to the reception, right? And in the reception, I was like, well, these are the persisters and they're here to tell their story. We're gonna hear from them. All of them, the 15 of them, use their platform to highlight a couple of issues from their own personal stories. So it was not even, let me tell you my story. All of them had already prepared a pitch for some persister sister that was still in the prison system, right? Or for nonprofits that they were supporting, that some of their colleagues were supporting. So it was beautiful to see, you know, the kind of like professionalization, if I may call it like that, of their own narratives, because they have found agency. They realized that by telling their own story, when they realized that there was genuine curiosity and that the public was actually being educated by their stories into what's happening into this system that pertains to us all, because we all vote for our local elections. I think they found their agency, and I think they found that it was that this kind of responsibility to give back even though they're still fighting for their own pathways, they all made a pitch for a nonprofit or for a persister or for a cause, for a clemency cause, or for a pardon that they feel was necessary in coming and right to the, and so that's the 360 that I've seen in all of them, from not wanting to participate in these official channels of communication, such as a museum and a university, to actually using that platform to leverage and speak for the other. I think if anything, I think they understood how important it is for them to tell their own stories, and for them use that platform to the betterment of folks that do not have that same voice, or they don't have the ability to have this platform for their own voices. So that's actually beautiful to see. I think they also saw, and I know I give long answers. I think they also saw the beauty of the metaphor in art. I think that they learned also that telling your own story in a candid, straightforward way is very, very strong. But they also found that they could also resort to metaphors, and beautiful metaphors that were inspiring and beautiful. It had like visual impact to tell things that are, complex and challenging, but that I think they all had this appreciation for the art and what art can do, well, bridging difference and addressing complex subject matters.
Thank you. Do you have a response? Okay, are there any final questions for Dr. Rameriz-Montagut? All right, once again, my apologies for missing that question. I want to thank Dr. Rameriz-Montagut for joining us tonight. It was a very thought-provoking and exciting conversation. If you enjoyed this, we have Jennifer Kobina next week talking from the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University and her studies on corrections and prison reentry. So everyone have a safe and enjoyable evening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Waller, and thank you, Dr. Rameriz-Montagut.
Thank you for the opportunity and your patience. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Monica, can I just say in closing that this community is incredibly fortunate to have you in your role as Broad Director. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, John. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
And very last word, I've just put in the chat box a link to the book written by Dr. Jennifer Kobina, who will be presenting on next Tuesday. So please get a copy in advance. Good night.